Good morning, brothers and sisters. I want to wish you a blessed Shabbat Shalom. And today I want to be reading for you the book of Jubilees, chapter 8. And this is concerning Noah and his sons and the divisions of the land that his sons were to inherit. There's a few things I found pretty interesting in this, and it's funny because when I went back to look for it again, I couldn't find it. These lands are divided up, as you will hear, according to land in the Middle East. But I ran across something a little earlier, and it was in a R.H. Charles version. There were some footnotes at the bottom that I glanced over. He had mentioned that when it refers to the when it refers to the north, that it really is the south. And I'm going to be digging into that a little bit more, because there is a group of people who believe that the Garden of Eden is actually in the islands of the Philippines. And you might be familiar with this idea. There has been a lot of videos on this as well. And when it describes the rivers, he actually goes into quite detail about the rivers and their names and the rivers that are in the Philippines. And like I said, he's calling that the Garden of Eden area. And he actually has a lot of videos to prove this. But I'm going to read chapter 8 to you, and this is the R.H. Charles version of Jubilees. In the 29th Jubilee, in the first week, in the beginning thereof, Aphrashad took to himself a wife, and her name was Razujah, the daughter of Susan, the daughter of Elam, and she bare him a son in the 3rd year in this week, and called his name Canaan. And the son grew, and his father taught him writing. He went to seek for himself a place where he might seize for himself a city. And he found writing on the walls of the cave that were carved in rock, and he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it, and sinned owing to it, for it contained the teaching of the watchers, in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun and the moon and the stars and all the signs of heaven. Now I want to pause here for a second, because he's referring to the watchers observing omens. This is much different than astronomy and the sun and the moon and the stars, which we use for all time to tell God's time, Yahuwah's holy times and holy days. Yet the watchers used them in a much different way. We're talking about paganism here. And when he wrote it down and said nothing regarding it, for he was afraid to speak to Noah about it, lest he should be angry with him on account of it. Pardon me. And in the 13th Jubilee, in the second week, in the first year thereof, he took to himself a wife, and her name was Milcah, the daughter of Madai, the son of Japhath. And in the 4th year, he begat a son, and called his name Selah. For he said, Truly I have been sent. And in the 4th year he was born. And Selah grew up and took to himself a wife, and her name was Moach, the daughter of Kesed, his father's brother, in the 113th Jubilee, in the 5th week of the 1st year thereof. And she bare him a son in the 5th year thereof, and called his name Eber. And he took to himself a wife, and her name was Azrad, the daughter of Nibrad, in the 32nd Jubilee, in the 7th week, in the 3rd year thereof. And in the 6th year thereof she bare him a son, and he called his name Peleg. For in the days he was born, the children of Noah began to divide the earth among themselves. For this reason he called his name Peleg. For that reason. And I found a footnote on that too. Perhaps I can look for it again at the end of this chapter. And they divided it secretly among themselves and told it to Noah. And it came to pass in the beginning of the 33rd Jubilee that they divided the earth into 3 parts, for Shem, Ham, and Japheth, according to the inheritance of each. In the 1st year of the 1st week, when one of us who had been sent was with them, and he called his sons, and they drew nigh to him, they and their children, and he divided the earth into lots, which his 3 sons were taken in possession, were to take in possession. And they reached forth their hands, and took the writing out of the bosom of Noah their father. And there came forth on the writing, as Shem's lot, the middle of the earth, which he should take as an inheritance for himself and for his sons, for the generations of eternity, from the middle of the mountain range of Rapha, from the mouth of the water of the river Tina. And his portion goes toward the west through the midst of this river, and it extends until it reaches the waters of the abyss, out of which this river goes forth, and pours its waters into the sea, Miat. And this river flows into the great sea. And all that is toward the north is Japheth's, and all that is toward the south belongs to Shem. Now, this, I believe, was one of the portions that was mentioned on the videos concerning Garden of Eden actually being in the Philippine Islands. And it extends till it reaches Carasso. This is in the bosom of the tongue, which looks toward the south. And his portion extends along the great sea, and it extends in a straight line till it reaches the west of the tongue, which looks toward the south. For this sea is named the tongue of the Egyptian sea. And it turns from here toward the south, toward the middle of the great sea, on the shore of it, its waters, and it extends to the west of Afra, and it extends till it reaches the waters of the river of Gihon, and to the south of the waters of Gihon, to the banks of this river. And it extends toward the east, until it reaches the Garden of Eden. To the south thereof, to the south, and from the sea, to to the south, and from the east of the whole land of Eden, and of the whole east it turns to the east and proceeds till it reaches the east of the mountains of Rapha, and it descends to the bank of the mouth of the river Tina. This portion came forth by lot for Shem and his sons, that they should possess it forever, unto his generations forevermore. And Noah rejoiced that this portion came forth for Shem and for his sons, and he remembered all that he had spoken with his mouth in prophecy, for he had said, Blessed be the Lord of Shem, and may the Lord dwell in the dwelling of Shem. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the holy of holies, and the dwelling of the Lord of Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Sion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other. And he blessed Yahuwah, the God of gods, who had put the word of the Lord into his mouth, and the Lord forevermore. And he knew that a blessed portion and a blessing had come to Shem and his sons unto the generations forever, the whole land of Eden, and the whole land of the Red Sea, and the whole land of the east, and India, and on the Red Sea, and on the mountains thereof, and all of the land of Bashan, and all the land of Lebanon, and the islands of Kaphtur, and all the mountains of Senir, and Ammana, and the mountains of Ashur, and the north, and all the land of Elam, Ashur, and Babel, and Susan, and Maadai, and all the mountains of Iraq, and all the region beyond the sea, which is beyond the mountains of Ashur, toward the north, a blessed and spacious land, and all that is in it, it is very good. And Ham came forth the second portion, beyond Gihon, toward the south to the right of the garden. And it extends toward the south, and it extends to all the mountains of fire, and it extends toward the west to the sea of Atel, and it extends toward the west till it reaches the sea of Muak, that sea unto which everything which is not destroyed descends. Ooh, the mountains of fire. That reminds me of the ring of fire, where we're having volcanoes everywhere. I need to look at a map to discover this a little bit more. And it goes forth toward the north to the limits of Gadir, and it goes forth to the coast of the waters of the sea, to the waters of the great sea, till it draws near to the river Gihon, and goes along the river Gihon till it reaches the right of the Garden of Eden. And this is the land which came forth for Ham, as the portion which he was to occupy forever for himself and for his sons, unto their generations forever. And Japheth came forth the third portion beyond the river Tina, to the north of the outflow of its waters, and it extends north easterly to the whole region of Gog, and to all the country east thereof, and it extends northernly to the north, and it extends to the mountains of Quelt toward the north, and towards the sea of Muak, and it goes forth to the east of Kedar, as far as the region of the waters of the sea, and it extends until it approaches the west of Farah, and it returns toward Afrajah. Afaraj, that's right. I've heard that before, towards Afaraj. And it extends easterly to the waters of the Sea of Miat. And it extends to the region of the river of Tina in the north, easterly direction until it approaches the boundary of its waters toward the mountain Rapha, and it turns around toward the north. This is the land which came forth for Japheth and his sons as the portion of his inheritance, which he should possess for himself and his sons for their generations forever. 5 great islands and a great land in the north. But it is cold, and the land of Ham is hot, and the land of Shem is neither hot nor cold, but it is of a blended cold and heat. Ooh, lots of things to study about here and discover, because there are so many things that are given in detail here that we don't see in our everyday scripture. So that's why the book of Jubilees is so exciting to study and read. This chapter I definitely want to dig into a little bit more, as he describes the 5 great islands and the areas being blended, cold, not cold nor hot. I find is captivating to myself anyway. So that's the conclusion of chapter 8 of Jubilees today. I hope you have enjoyed this chapter, and pardon me and forgive me on some of the pronunciations as I stumble through. Unless you go prior to reading the chapter and actually make note on all these names. Sometimes they can catch you by surprise. Anyway, please give a little thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And check out the subscription box at the bottom, where I will have other places that you can perhaps become a Patreon or subscribe to being a donor to the channels. I've been very blessed on this series, and I thank you so much, those of you who have blessed me. It has been a wonderful experience. Also, one of my more recent ventures that you can check out is on Instagram, where I have been actually presenting my artwork, something that has been in the making for a while. And if you want to look at that, is Woman of the Way, Arden K Arts. Thank you, and have a wonderful Shabbat Shalom. Yahuwah bless you and make his face to shine upon you today and forever and always.